Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Cadlove, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength. Yes, that's right, myself, Chris Duffin. To my left, the man with the massive grind, the one and only wizard of training, Brandon Sen.
I got bumped in the order of introductions without Professor Rudy here.
You did, because Professor Rudy is out today, and I saved the last introduction for a reason. I'm battling a cold today, by the way, so I'm supposed to deadlift this afternoon. I'm not looking forward to that. So we'll see how I do in this podcast, because I am entirely not caffeinated at all. Hopefully, I can manage.
I think you'll
But
be okay.
I'm saved because to my right is the man that never stops talking. Oh, wait, no, he doesn't talk. Shit. You got to up your game today.
Rudy's not here to interrupt me, so I should be able to get a few words in.
That's true. That somehow Rudy does not recognize.
I plan
like every time you're about to speak, like he starts.
Yep.
Starts in. So today's your day to shine. That's right.
Perfect.
Undergraduate of deadlift, Brady Cable. So he will be standing in for Rudy today.
I'm going to strategically cough every time Brady tries to talk.
That's a good plan.
What'd you say?
That won't get annoying at all.
But speaking of Rudy, it's been interesting last week because you two were both out at USAPL Nationals.
Yep.
Down in Florida with the 1,200 or odd some competitors, right?
That's right.
That's right. As well as some of our other staff. So we're just getting back rolling this week. But you didn't. You had a dog sit your dog last week.
You did dog sit my dog.
Yeah, he didn't die. That's good.
I know you enjoyed cuddling with him.
I know.
He's sweet.
I sent you many pictures of Tucky having a good time. And our gym has a no dog policy. So Tucky has never been to the gym before.
Until now.
But this last week, I thought I would troll my business partner, my training partner.
Rudy.
And we brought in Tucky every day. And he would sit on the couch and run around the gym, and Rudy'd be like, dogs don't belong in gyms. Dogs don't belong in gyms. And I bring in Tucky. He'd run around. But that first night, I didn't tell you this. So Brandon comes over and drops his dog off at like 9 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And I go to bed at like 9:30. So he's probably a little worked up. New house, hasn't had a chance to adjust to it at all or nothing. And Tucky didn't sleep that night. Like, he was up all night. It was like 3 a.m. I like wake up to the panting. and Tucky's nose and tongue are a half inch from my face. He's just sitting there, face to face with me while I'm asleep. Going, what you doing? What you doing? Hey, how are things going? Hey, what's going on?
That's basically exactly right. And he is also a golden retriever for those unaware. So he has a lot of energy and a lot of love to give to other people. Doesn't really care for other dogs though, but he likes people.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was a good week.
It was a nice vacation.
Trolling, and we were just talking about any time that like today would have been a good opportunity.
We could have had Tucker sit in for Rudy instead of Brady on the podcast.
Yep.
Just hear heavy breathing. Well, you got the heavy breathing part covered, but
so any time.
It hasn't been as bad. I remember when we first started this podcast, subtly in the background would be. Your weight's gone down a little bit.
It
so
has.
good.
I'm down about 15 pounds. Yeah. Total. So anyway, today on our podcast, I'd like to welcome Phil Daru, strength coach for American Top Team and host for Fight Strength podcast. Did I get the podcast name right, Phil?
Yeah, you got it right.
Oh, yes. My memory is not very good today, so I've been, I wasn't so sure about that. So really excited to have Phil on today. So we've known Phil for a little bit. Actually, just met in person recently. A month or two ago now.
Boston.
Boston. So Phil works with MMA athletes and uses a lot of similar principles and some of the stuff that we do, and it should be a really, really good discussion, talking with a strength coach from, another discipline that we haven't spent a lot of time chatting with before. So welcome to the program, Phil.
I have to say, thanks a lot for having me on. I've been a long time advocate of your work and obviously a big fan, but I am totally disappointed because we haven't been talking about Brandon's non-existent calves. Yeah, that's a disappointment for me, but it's all right. And you know what? I can't even lie. I don't have calves either, but I do have hamstrings, so we're picking it up there.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad that's out of the way.
That way you can never.
But he has a tremendous beard, by the way, so that's okay.
Thank you. That's what we like to call a compliment sandwich. It's been happening a lot lately here.
Bad stuff in the middle.
Anyway, how are you, Phil?
I'm gonna tell you, it's long days for me, man. I have 18-hour days going in, so I'm working with 50 some odd fighters, and then also with my regular clients that I have a little bit up north, and then also my online clients, and also training under Brady's tutelage, by the way. Yeah, I know. It's okay.
Beep.
We've been okay. We've been doing all right. So
I know it might be a little dangerous having you two on the podcast together.
Be prepared for the muscular atrophy to follow.
I would venture and go so far as to say things are going well so far.
Oh.
No, it is. To be honest, it is really going well. I'm actually excited about it and getting ready for this meet in February, so it'll be good. Yep. But got to set aside some time to obviously train, and you guys know as well as being coaches and having a business and things like that, it takes a lot of time away from you, and also I have a full family, so trying to get in as much training as possible and be, as efficient as possible is tough, but it's something you have to do.
18-hour days, that's some long days there, Phil.
That's a new record, right, Chris? I think that's a new record. I could be the most hardest working man in the strength business. I think that's possible, but it might be you. You never know.
They're going to argue that my napping might get in the way of that, but there's many studies, coming out that, about the prioritization of sleep, and I'm just saying, I'm
a caffeine junkie right now. I have a lot of coffee by my side. I actually have this, and I hope they pay me for this, but it's a Celsius. It's an energy drink. I hope Brady's approving of this, but it has to be done because I have to deadlift in a couple hours. So
me too. Me too.
Yep. See? Well, you're gonna deadlift a lot more than me, Chris.
Well, that's the goal is to try that. So
exactly.
So, currently and in the past, you've had a number of fairly high-profile clients that you work with as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the clientele that you work with?
Sure. So I have Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She's the strawweight world champion for UFC. Some say she may be the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. Dustin Poirier, he's another UFC veteran. King Mo Lawal, who's another Bellator veteran and a former Olympic wrestler. And then, Amanda Nunes, who's the bantamweight women's world champion for the UFC, and a bunch of others. I mean, we have a huge amount of talent at American Top Team, so I'm getting to train and work with the best fighters in the world on a consistent basis, and I can't ask for anything more.
You're doing some really cool stuff that I've seen, too. I know a lot of the time people try to get too sport specific with their strength conditioning and that they try to mimic the movements people are doing in sport, and they end up mostly just junking up their patterns. It seems like you're doing a lot of intelligent training of people. Specifically, I see you doing a lot of work with some of the IAP principles we've gone over ourselves and in our seminars. And also just I see you do a lot of anti-rotation stuff to help strengthen the fighters in that way as well.
Yeah, I think that this is a major component and a big problem in the MMA strength and conditioning world, and especially I see it a lot with boxers as well, is we try to get too sport-specific in the movements under load, where at the same time they could change the biomechanics of the actual skills work that they're doing. And I was a fighter for 8 years, I was a pro, I understand the processes or why they're doing that, but it's not completely accurate. It shouldn't be done that way. Punching with dumbbells and things like that, it changes joint angles. it puts bad tension on the joints and shearing. And we don't really want to do that. We want to try to reserve them as much as possible because they're getting kicked and punched on a daily basis. So for me as a physical preparation coach, I want to make sure that we are, keeping it as safe as possible, getting the best bang for our buck. But that risk to reward ratio needs to be, as accurate as possible. So, yeah, I'll do a lot of general fitness with them on the outside of camp. A lot of it is just building a solid aerobic base and work capacity. And that's just doing the main lifts, squat, bench, deadlift. I don't put a lot of bars on my fighters' back just because they're hindered by joint manipulation from years of training, years of fighting. So they have a lot of shoulder and elbow problems, wrist injuries. So what I do like to do is something called a Zercher squat or a trap bar deadlift. And we do a lot of rear foot elevated split squats and things like that. But from an IAP standpoint, I always make sure that we are understanding how to properly breathe through our diaphragm. And what I'm seeing here is I've been doing this a lot with Dustin Poirier, and he's been seeing a tremendous improvement in his power output and his force coming from, his core. And basically what I'm trying to manipulate or actually enhance is, proximal stability with distal mobility. If we can do that, then he's going to be a better athlete and have more power in the long run. And also just being able to breathe systematically and with a good approach instead of being a chest breather or a stress breather in a sense, and really getting that full spectrum of IAP so that they can perform at their best.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dustin as a veteran of the UFC. It's good to be able to make these improvements still, even this far into a career, and still be getting better.
Yeah, the good thing about him is that, he's willing to adapt and change, and he's still a young guy. He's still only like 27 years old. So for him, he's still willing to do new things and progress further in his career. And that's the same with a lot of my guys and girls that are open-minded. And if they're not really open-minded to change, then they're not going to be as successful as they can be. And, and they trust me because I've been there for a long time. I've also have a fighting background along with, the scientific background. So whatever I, integrate into their system, into their program, they're pretty much apt to doing whatever is appropriate for that time being. But as long as I can tell them what it's really working and why it's working in a skills perspective, if I can tell them that, if we get this breathing and bracing down properly, you're going to be able to throw that hook a little bit more powerful, be able to move a little bit more efficiently. And if you have proper stability, the movement capabilities are endless.
Yeah, I love watching, particularly the videos you posted with Dustin, and you can see the changes in power output there. And I think it's just an interesting discussion, watching you do this in this sport, and obviously we deal with a lot of other sports as well. But we still get a lot of people, that come to us saying, well, this only applies to powerlifting. No, this is, like you just said, you're making a better athlete, not just a better fighter, right?
And a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as saying, exactly how we're trying to be as powerlifters. We're trying to, exude as much force as possible. It's the same time. I know it's a linear approach. We're squatting, benching, and deadlifting, but with the biomechanic demands of the sport, you have to be efficient in your movement capabilities. And if you can't move multi-directional with good core stability, you're going to get hurt. So I think that correlates well into every other sport, not just MMA, not just powerlifting, but all sports in general, because change of direction is big. And if you don't have eccentric strength along with that core stability, it's not going to end well for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get it twisted, especially what Chris was saying is that only applies to powerlifting, because we talk a lot about keeping a neutral spine in order to maximize IAP. And obviously, especially in mixed martial arts, you can't always keep that perfect position, but you can always try to optimize stability and get into the better position, even if it's not the best position for different sports and different positions.
Yeah, if I can optimize a neutral spine in training, and remember, they are training from a physical preparation standpoint, if they get into a bad situation or a bad position in combat, then they'll be better apt to withstand that load or any forces put upon them, because they're able to have that good strengthening in their core. Otherwise, if their core is weak, if they don't understand proper bracing and a neutral spine when they're doing things under load, then when they have forces put upon them, it's going to be a bad outcome because they don't understand the process of how to get out of bad situations. So if it's a bad situation or a bad position for them, they know that they need to get out of there as efficient as possible and with good movement capabilities.
It's almost like you're trying to improve their capacity to move better, longer, versus being so rigid with keeping perfect positions all the time. So we know that especially with sports like MMA, there's a very big strength component there, but there's also a very big aerobic component, being able to last into the later rounds. What are your thoughts on when you're working with your athletes on actually increasing their capacity to do more work longer?
Well, exactly. That's what we try to accomplish out of camp at that point. Once they're in camp, it's usually all about skills work and honing in and tapering down for their fights. So we do decide, once we're about, we really can't really figure out when we're actually going to fight. Some guys take fights on short notice, which is, not exactly the most optimal of situations, but at the same time, we're trying to develop that high aerobic capacity. And that could just be, a standard LSD work where we're just, moving slow, low duration or, low intensity for a long duration. And once we can build up that solid aerobic base with a high enough VO2, then we can start working into anaerobic, alactic, and lactic conditioning sessions. And this will start to happen about 8 weeks out from the fight. So building that solid aerobic base through long duration aerobic work does actually help once you get into camp, because that gives you that solid base to actually be able to strength train and do your aerobic work more efficiently. And also with their skills practice, they're actually going into camp in shape instead of having to get in shape in camp.
Yes, so is it fair to say that you're trying to make them more resilient and just better prepared to handle more work and do more quality work once they do get into camp?
Exactly. We want to build that solid work capacity base because they're going to be doing a lot of frequency, a lot of volume. I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 hours or 3 sessions a day, throughout that whole week span. And some of these guys overtrain themselves tremendously just because it's just that old school mentality of I got to train more. I got to feel like I'm going to die to get something out of this situation. But at the end of the day, I think now I'm educating these guys and these girls on how to properly, program their whole training systems. And we got good, other coaches that schedule out their training throughout the week so they don't overtrain and overreach. But a lot of my stuff is dependent upon autoregulation. Whenever they come in, I want to see exactly, how they're feeling, what they're doing. But if we can build that aerobic base outside of camp, like I said, they'll be better apt to, deal with the stresses put upon them in camp.
What types of things are you looking for in terms of autoregulation for your fighters?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just being able to communicate with your athletes and your fighters. I mean, I'm looking into getting an HRV monitor. But a lot of these guys, I have, like I said, over 50 fighters. So to get them all to have an HRV monitor is pretty difficult. But, grip testing in the morning, looking at their heart rate, their raised or elevated heart rate in the morning, if so. And then also coordination in our warm-ups. If their coordination is off and I can see they're tired, then that usually is a telltale sign that they're either overreaching or overtrained. And a lot of it is knowing their schedule. If they have a hard wrestling session that morning, obviously I'm not going to have them go max effort lift on a deadlift that day or that afternoon because, it's just going to tax their central nervous system even more, and they won't be able to train throughout the weeks ahead.
Yeah, I got to imagine that HRV could be an incredibly valuable thing to use for fighters, especially considering the many different training qualities necessary. So for our listeners who may not be quite up to speed on what we're talking about, HRV stands for heart rate variability, and it's essentially taking a measure. So there are some different HRVs. There's some that take measures of subjective questions and correlate that as a baseline to your resting heart rate upon waking. But ultimately, it's looking at the changes in your heart rate over the course of a week, and it's what we call a lagging indicator. So it's not necessarily going to tell you your exact readiness, but it's a great indicator to tell you the response that your body sustain from the previous training that happened. So if you're doing a training block review or trying to look at past data, it's a great way to say, okay, this 20% increase in volume this past block actually destroyed my guys compared to previously, so maybe I dial it in different. It's also a great way to see lifestyle changes and different things like that.
Yeah, I did HRV for about a year and have worked with a number of people that have used it extensively. Patrick Ward, the sports scientist for the Seattle Seahawks, was one that kind of turned me onto it a long time ago. But the science behind that is it's heart rate. You're not looking at the heart rate itself, but the variation in the heart rate.
Yeah, the
your heart's not exact. It's not beating at 60 beats a minute. It's at 57, 63, and so it's tugging between the sympathetic and parasympathetic sides of the nervous system. And so when you look at the variation and the standard deviation from a statistical standpoint, that's actually what the heart rate variability is. So it's telling you you're not really in one phase or the other. If you're overtrained, they're fighting each other.
And then some of the apps that they'll hook up to will tell you what qualities are recommended to train that day, whether it's best to train for an aerobic session, a strength session, a power session, things like that. Though I'm not 100% convinced that that's the best use for it, but it is something that's available with those apps. So that's for our listeners, that's what HRV is. But yeah, I think probably not feasible to have every single fighter purchase a unit, but if you could, I mean, the more data that you can actually manage, the better. But at some point, more data becomes just noise.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, I wish I did. And I know a couple of like the Omega Wave and Bioforce by Joel Jamieson are very good indicators and technology to use for the HRV. But I mean, another thing that you guys are actually using is the velocity-based training, which I'm actually very interested in utilizing as well. I mean, not from so much a bar pass standpoint, but maybe from a explosive med ball throw or a box jump or something, with quantitative evidence that I could see that really correlates into a mixed martial artist.
Yep, and I think that's whoa, something's funny with the sound there. Okay. So, that's an important piece in understanding where Brandon was just saying, a leading or a lagging indicator, where the HRV is going to tell you after that training session the next day, hey, you overtrained, where if we actually look at the output on the barbell, we know what's going on and what decisions we need to make and the impact of what today's training is going to have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's something that we can do on the fly right then and there, which is actually very good for me because at the end of the day, with my schedule and my circumstances, I have classes and groups going, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, back to back to back. So, for me, it would have to be something along the lines of having to trust them enough to do this in the morning from an HRV standpoint, have them trust them enough to do it in the morning. But also that's a psychological factor with fighters. A lot of the times they're trying to push it regardless, and they feel like they're quote unquote a pussy if they don't train hard. So at the end of the day, I have to almost regulate that myself, because if not, they're going to just think that they're not in shape or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm not going to lie, with fighters, it's very, very mental. There's a big psychological component into going into camp, especially getting down to that 4 weeks out mark where they're just like, they're beat down, physically and mentally, and they just want to be in the best shape possible. And the only way they actually know how to do that from past experiences is to overtrain themselves, which is obviously not optimal. It's not efficient, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm not super up to date on what's currently being done in the side of mixed martial arts or MMA strength and conditioning, but I have to imagine with some of the advances in technology, I don't want to say advances because the technology has been around for a very long time, but for the application of that technology, I have to think that a lot of these strength coaches are going to become much more savvy in the application of training variables and in matching them with the the demand of a fighter's schedule. Because like you said, you have some fighters who are going 2 or 3 times a day. That is a lot of variables to manipulate. And like you said, a lot of those fighters are just pushing through and training harder because that's what they know. And that's, I mean, I suppose that is the mentality that's necessary to get kicked in the head for a living, for a sport, you know? So
it's not that fun. But.
Yeah. So you gotta probably have to be a little crazy, but, you know, being able to control that and focus that in specific areas, I think we're probably going to see some real freaks come out of the woodworks in the coming years.
I think that's a big...
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with understanding the sport in general. So a lot of strength coaches are coming from different sides of backgrounds, like a track background or a football background or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that just because you haven't fought before that you wouldn't understand how to physically prepare a fighter for combat. But at the same time, you still need to understand what goes into the sport itself. And you have to have good communication with your skills practice coaches. And a lot of the times, you know, fighters are going to different gyms and different camps to get their training in. And all these coaches are not communicating together to fully prepare their fighter. And one wrestling coach is going to try to outwork or kill that fighter that day. And then he's going to go to, you know, his BJJ school, and they're going to kill him there doing, you know, an hour of live rolls. And then they're going to do kickboxing and then sparring. And then they're going to try to do physical preparation or strength and conditioning. And that strength and conditioning coach, if he doesn't understand the bioenergetics demands of the sport and the physical demands that it requires, he's going to try to kill him too. And a lot of it is, you know, back in the day, all it was basically just let's do circuits and circuit train and do, you know, 5-minute bouts here and there and try to just make sure that they're sweating and they're dying, about to pass out. And that's not the case anymore. I think that we are getting more, you know, strategic with our approaches, and we're actually periodizing the programs to peak the fighter at the right times. And that's the step in the right direction that we need to go about doing in a strength and conditioning world for mixed martial arts.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really bad info coming actually from powerlifting. It seems like there's been a few fighters that have hooked up with...
What are you talking about?
I know. There's been a few higher-level fighters that have hooked up with some pretty powerlifting-focused people for their strength conditioning coaching, and they tend to get into this mindset of, if I can put 20 pounds on their deadlift, then they'll be a better fighter, and they focus too much on the wrong things.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because obviously I'm a lifter, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to train them like a lifter. You know,
exactly.
You have to train them in all different modalities, like I said, and it's a different sport in general. You know, it's highly glycolytic, it's highly aerobic, but there's also other you know situations in there, and also your skills practice is very key. Like you cannot substitute, you know, strength work for your kickboxing unless you're out of camp. You know, especially when it gets down to it's just like if we were to put, you know, okay, we got a meet coming up, but we're doing hypertrophy work, you know, 4 to 3 weeks out from a meet. It's not applicable. It's not what we need to do. It's not sport specific. So, you know, I think that that's a key component that people need to realize. And then, you know, powerlifting coaches, like I said, and trust me, Brady, you're the man. I'm not saying nothing, but I would not trust you enough to train Joanna Jędrzejczyk for her title fight, unless you were to, you know, coordinate with me a little bit.
Rightfully so.
There you go.
Yeah, like you said, having that background in it definitely ups your knowledge of just what they need a lot, and that's where a lot of people miss the mark.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, we know that there's an infinite number of differences between the sport of powerlifting and the sport of mixed martial arts, but you have a very unique perspective on that because you train some of the highest level fighters and you're also a competitive powerlifter. So in your eyes, what are some of the what are some things that are maybe similar between the training of the two, or is there even anything?
Well, first of all, I started powerlifting because I needed to, after I retired from MMA, I needed an outlet. So the aggression, the competitive edge of the sport from that aspect is definitely similar. You know, it's the same as if they close the cage door and somebody's, you know, staring you down. You know, it's just you and him or you and her. And, you know, that could play a big role in how you go about, you know, dealing with that situation. And the same thing goes for if you have, you know, 1,000 pounds on the bar and you're getting underneath it, that could, you know, potentially break you, could kill you. So at that same time, that aspect is similar. Also, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, I believe that, you know, power and absolute strength will help a fighter tremendously, but it has to be put in at the right times. You definitely don't want to max effort them all the time, because one, a lot of the times these guys don't even know how to lift weights in general, and they've never lifted weights a day in their life. So for me, 3 to 5 rep maxes are our key hit point there. We do a lot of AMRAP sets, and then from an aerobic standpoint, just having better work capacity through hypertrophy and joint centration, and also, you know, just joint integrity to camp. So the periodization of it can be similar also. It's just you have to throw that aerobic capacity component in there as well.
Do you ever find that you have a new individual or someone coming to you who is so dominant in one quality that you have to completely negate training that for a while? So say, I think an easy example would be if a powerlifter came to you and they're like, hey, I want to get into mixed martial arts. They probably don't need to continue to powerlift or to squat, bench, and deadlift heavy because they have so many other qualities to develop. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where maybe you have someone who's just an aerobic beast? You have a marathon runner who comes to you, or maybe you have someone who has extremely high power profile. They're a shot putter. Do you ever find that you have to work those training ratios in a manner that negate some of those things that they're already incredibly good at?
Yeah, I run into this a lot, actually, to be honest, because certain fighters have backgrounds, and also I have powerlifters that come to me that actually want to start training MMA. So yeah, we'll back down of their quote unquote strengths and start to implement more of what they're missing. So you got to think of it as, you know, trying to be a jack of all trades at that point and trying to pick up certain pieces that you're lacking. And the same goes for their skill work. If they're primarily a kickboxer coming into MMA, they're going to have to spend more time on grappling, wrestling, you know, BJJ and all that. And also from an aerobic standpoint, if they're primarily a kickboxer, they usually have a better aerobic, you know, alactic capacity. But from a wrestler standpoint, they may have high lactic and anaerobic capacity. So depending on, you know, what their background is, what their strengths are, I like to make sure that we're integrating more of what they're missing definitely throughout out of camp, and build that base. And then we can try to trickle in everything that they're good at, because I do want them not to totally lose out on what they were good at. But we have to make sure that we're bringing all the pieces together and trying to make it as equally as possible to be a mixed martial artist.
Yeah, there's definitely, as we've kind of been going back and forth this whole time, there's tons of qualities that need to be developed as a professional fighter. So.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a job, and if you're not a professional or you're an amateur and you're not, you know, fully taking advantage of every opportunity that you have to get better each and every day, every hour on the hour, you know, and that could be anything. That could be also sleeping or napping like Chris does, you know. But
yes, that's part of his training. Let him think that.
I think everybody should take naps like Chris if they want to deadlift 1,000 pounds. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I don't have that amount of time for me. But you know, the fighters, I make sure that they're, you know, properly refueled and rehydrated throughout every practice, trying to get them back to parasympathetic as soon as possible, because within an hour or 2 or 3, they got to train again. So, you know, I don't know. I went on a tangent. I forgot the damn question.
That was perfect.
That's all right. I've got a leading question here. So I love your stuff. Like, you post some really good scientific stuff. You post some great movement pieces. Like, the things that I see when I follow you is absolutely fantastic. It looks like very evidence-based stuff, and it works. But it seems like in your sport as a whole that there seems to be a proliferation of people that get bought into some sort of guru trainer status. It seems more prominent in
probably
MMA
more than that sport than any.
Yeah, than other. And you know, do you see that, or is that just like an outsider's view? But it just seems like there's some people with like really no like solid background that have like some weird thing that get involved as like these trainers. And next thing you know, they'll have like some great athlete that they're working with that they've convinced they know that their stuff, and you watch it, and it's like, wow, that is crap.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because of the fact that these fighters don't know any better. So I see it all the way around. I see it from even not just from mixed martial arts. I see it from other sports as well.
Oh,
but
it happens in all sports, but yeah.
Yeah. But I look at it and I'm like, damn, why the hell is he doing that? But like, you know, at the end of the day, it's a gimmicky thing. And I hate and I've had people call me a guru, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? I'm not a guru.
I believe they meant to say Daru.
That's it. That's what it was. You're right. And like, to be honest, man, I'm just doing what I know and what I know works, and trying to get these fighters at the best physical performance they can possibly be and keep them safe. But I think a lot of people miss the boat with gimmicky, you know, the what's new, or, you know, the hot topic of the week, or, you know, the flavor of the week type thing. And it's like I said, it's unfortunate because these fighters don't know, you know. And I mean, I seen one thing that, not to name any names, but fuck it, I'll do it anyways. Cain Velasquez. You know, Cain Velasquez is a high-level mixed martial artist. He was a heavyweight champ at UFC, and they had this guy doing, like, max effort quad extensions for, like, sets of 100. And I'm like, what exactly is that doing for you right now, besides tearing up your patella? And you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, like, I'm flabbergasted by these situations that I see and it's usually on social media. There's no other ways around it. Like, and a lot of it is just for social media. Like, it's Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all that. And it's something to get likes and get views. But at the end of the day, is that really helping your fighter? Absolutely not. Yeah. So you have to really understand what's gonna benefit the fighter. And even if it looks boring, it looks like, you know, it's not, quote unquote, you know, exciting to watch, it's effective. So you need to make sure that you're doing that, you know, consistently. If your true job is to get these athletes in the best physical, you know, being that they can be, then you have to make sure that you have a scientific approach with real world adaptation, you know, stimulus. So with that being said, I honestly, I try not to look at it. I try to look away, to be honest. I don't really pay it no mind. But, you know, sometimes I just got to shake my head, man. I'm just like, shit, man, this is ridiculous. But it is what it is.
We see a lot of that.
Yeah.
Powerlifting.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
I'm sure.
It's everywhere. I just asked because it seems a little more prominent in MMA than other sports.
Well, yeah.
So,
Chris. That's the reason why, because it's so new. I think the sport is new, and even though, you know, it's been around now for about, you know, 10, maybe 20 years, from a physical preparation standpoint, it's very new. You know, there's a handful of coaches out there that really know what they're doing, and some of them don't have a lot of them don't have an MMA background. A lot of them come from a track background and things like that. But they get it. They understand it. They took the time to understand the sport. They took the time to actually go to practices and watch the fighters compete and train, and they can correlate their program around that, instead of just being like, oh, I seen him do this, so I think this is going to work, and it's going to look good. And it's just stupid. You know what I mean?
That, I think, is a good assessment right there, is that one, not only is the sport new, but the strength and conditioning side of it is even much newer. Yeah.
The sport's probably, we had Chael Sonnen on a while ago, and he contended. Really? He's actually a local guy around here. Grew up maybe about 20 minutes away from where our gym's actually located. But he contended that you know, fighting was the oldest sport in the book, because at some point someone just came along and said, "Hey, I'm gonna punch you in the face," and the other guy said, "No, I'm gonna punch you in the face harder." And then whoever stops punching the other in the face first loses, you know. But definitely getting better at punching people in the face. That is that's something that's much newer.
Chael's not completely wrong. We just didn't have it sanctioned.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. We've been fighting for years, for decades, or for centuries. It's just, you know, now basically it's the most primal sport in the book, and that's why everybody can relate to it. And Chris, I know when we were at the seminar, we went out to eat on Saturday night. It's a good story here. Hold on.
Okay.
So we went out to eat Saturday night, right? And Chris he's got the whiskey. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I could pay him, but I knew we were gonna lift. Yeah, exactly. I knew we were gonna lift the next day, so I couldn't enjoy the whiskey myself, because one, I'm a lightweight. If I have whiskey one glass, I'm probably gonna be on my ass. so I didn't do it. Other than that, so my guy, I told him to turn on, the UFC because the fights were on that night, and one of my fighters were on at the time, and Chris comes and sits next to us, and he's talking with everybody, and then all of a sudden, my guy actually ends up getting rocked and getting hit, and he's stumbling around, and then he comes back. And he almost knocks his opponent out, and I jump up and I'm like, "Come on!" And I swear, Chris probably thought I was crazy because his eyes lit up like, "Who the hell is this guy?" But it was just me being me, and and just showing enthusiasm for my fighter. But I honestly thought Chris probably thought I was crazy at that point. So I hope that wasn't the case, brother.
No. You should have mentioned your fighter was on the TV. I think you did afterwards. So.
I did afterwards, yeah. At the time, it was probably pretty weird. You probably just thought I was a crazy fan or some shit.
Speaking of you,
I think I was actually in the middle of stealing food off of other people's plates at the time, so it was.
Speaking of you and Chris, so let's role play for a minute. For those unaware, Chris can't straighten his arms because of certain elbow issues. Can't.
Bone problems. Yes.
Bone problems.
Just had an MRI yesterday again on it.
Can't feed yourself without tossing it, something like that.
Shut up. I got a long fork.
So if Chris wanted to become a fighter, how could we get him to actually throw a punch straight with his elbows in the condition that they are?
It would have to depend upon, the actual joint angles and what's going on with his bone structure at the time. I have a fighter actually by the name of King Mo who can't do the same thing. He looks and he feeds himself just like Chris. So, I mean, for me, I make sure that they are more apt to throwing. Obviously, the straight punches are going to be shorter and not extended all the way out. So he would have to get comfortable from a skill standpoint. He would have to get comfortable fighting on the inside and throwing hooks, uppercuts, short up jabs, things like that. But fully locking out his elbow probably will be pretty problematic at the end of the day. And he would just have to get good at grappling from a mixed martial arts standpoint and just wrestle this shit. And I heard he's got a wrestling background.
Chris is a former wrestler. He's a former wrestler.
Yeah.
There is hope after all.
It wouldn't be a bad thing. And I know Chris has some I know he likes to punch people in the stomach a lot. So
Oh, is that why you developed that technique? Because you can't get him any higher.
It is. And I seen him punch. I think it was Mark Bell in the stomach, and I think Mark Bell almost shit himself. But it was good. He stepped into it. He threw his shoulder into it. I wasn't mad at it. The only thing was he kept his other hand down. So if Mark really wanted to get him back, he could have countered him with a hook, and then he would have been, it would have been a bad problem. So make sure you keep your hands up, Chris.
All right. I just rely on my crazy eyes. So I figure if I get people who have crazy eyes,
That's the crazy eyes is what you gave me Saturday night after I yelled and screamed at my fight. I was like, uh-oh. That's cool.
Well, there is hope after all. Once this whole powerlifting exhibition thing runs its course, there is a future for you in fighting.
Listen, I'm coming down. I'm coming up to Oregon for you guys in December, and we will have a full-on sparring match between us all.
Between us all at once.
A battle royale.
We've got a wrestling match.
I said we have a wrestling match. Should I invite Trail over?
Let's do it. I think somebody hit me up on the message board or on the private group page about coming up.
I think that might have been Lainey. She's really interested in mixed martial arts. We got quite a few guys here.
We got a few, yeah.
Be really interested in that.
Yeah, definitely want to come up and check you guys out.
They do have those giant. I have no idea what it's called, but it's basically 3-on-3 fights in an octagon. Yeah. We could definitely organize one of those.
That's
between
cool.
you guys.
I'll be throwing flying knees and Superman punches all over the place with you guys. I'm not letting Chris get close to me, by the way.
I watched you throw some punches the other day. You still got some pretty good speed with those hands. So
I got some pop at this 210-pound body when I used to fight at 155. So
damn. My high school wrestling was 175.
Okay. Yep.
It was a little guy.
Almost a state champion.
Shush.
Well, I just throw salt on
I got beat by Chael Sonnen in the spine. Freaking Better stated.
That's always a good
I
story.
lost the match.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't get beat.
He did
It was
not.
a close call.
Well, he won.
He won because I lost. But
However you got to frame it.
Yeah, that's true.
Brady's not talking over there. Why is that? Is he getting bashful because we're talking about fighting or what?
No, just listening, absorbing, and thinking about how I'm going to be on your team in this battle royale.
Oh, there's no team.
oh, that's it. You're going down before them.
Haven't you ever watched professional wrestling? It's the first one to get thrown out of the ring is out.
There it is.
We get a lot of medieval weapons in the gym.
You've stated that now, so don't worry. You won't be making it till then.
Okay.
I'm gonna definitely.
Just as long as
handicapped.
nobody picks up that shoulder rock and tries to swing it at me.
I would definitely choose Kyle and Jody's team. Those two little psychopath 165ers.
Yeah, that's true. They both got a little background there too.
Yeah. Well, anything else you guys want to talk to Phil the Guru Daru?
Oh, there it is. That's the new nickname.
That's your new Instagram handle.
Oh,
Daru
jeez.
Guru. I like it.
Well, Phil, it's been an awesome chat. Where can our listeners find out more about what you got going on? Where can they find some of your distance coaching services and plug that podcast of yours again?
Awesome. So you can go to darustrong.com and make sure you sign up for the newsletter there. Also, if you want to do any type of virtual coaching, especially with the MMA guys, you can just email me, phil@darustrong.com. And also my podcast, which is every week, is Fight Strength Podcast. You can find it on all podcast networks. And I want to thank you guys for having me on, man. It's a real pleasure and honor for sure. And can't wait to keep working with you guys and keep getting these numbers up.
Yeah, we're excited, man. Super excited to have you here in December too and hang out a little.
So
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks again, Phil. Been a pleasure.
All right, Chris.
All right.
All right, I'll see you guys.